Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Ashutosh Kumar. I happen to be a professor of political science in Punjab University. I also am the principal investigator of EPG Pathshala in the subject of political science. In this module, we are going to discuss about the nature of participation and representation in India. We are going to discuss how Indian mode of electoral participation is different from the Western democracies. As we know that in India, the electoral democracy has succeeded a lot in the sense that India is primarily being seen as a success story of a political democracy. And in India, the electoral politics is very distinct in the sense that if you talk about the lower level of elections, like the elections for the assembly, elections for the panchayat body, then the voter turnout become much more than the say voter turnout for a Lok Sabha election. This is very different from the Western countries. Also in the Western democracies, it is the rich people, educated people, the upper classes who tend to vote in larger percentages. Whereas in India, it's not only the middle classes, but in fact the poorer people, uneducated people, they vote in much larger percentage than the rich people. So that way also we have this exceptionalism of India's electoral democracy. Also, like in the Western countries, electoral turnout is going down, whereas in India, electoral turnout is increasing with every election. In fact, 2014 Lok Sabha elections saw record participation. In fact, in India, the turnout is increasing not only in terms of numbers, but also in terms of the greater representation, greater participation of different communities. Minorities are participating in larger number. Women participation is increasing. Scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, they have been also participating in very large number in the India's elections. So how can we explain this? How can we explain this so-called democratic upsurge? And basically in this module we are going to discuss precisely that. In this module we would discuss that how during the Congress period, when the Congress was the dominant party, it was a Congress era, then the participation was quite low. Though the Congress party was kind of a social umbrella party, it had a social coalitional support base and all, but the electoral vote turnout was not so high. Even despite the fact that the constitution makers gave the right to vote to one and all, universal franchise was introduced in India right from the independence, unlike the Western democracies where the right to vote was given in a gradual manner. But what we have seen that after the decline of the Congress as a kind of a colossal party and the rise of the state parties, which we all discuss in this module, the rise of the state parties, now the electoral participation has increased. And there also in this module we discuss about that how the electoral participation in different states vary from one state to another state. Obviously in those states like Kerala, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, which have been the movement politics states, where there has been a movement politics, the electoral turnout is always higher than the national average. Punjab is another example where the electoral turnout has been always higher than the national average. Then we can also see that what is happening in today's India is that despite the great degree of confidence in the role of the Election Commission as a constitutional body, and despite having free and fair elections, despite having very high level of electoral participation and electoral volatility, a very highly competitive party system, unfortunately, during the elections, people come and vote, and they vote in larger number, and every kind of people vote. In fact, our law-making bodies are becoming more and more representative. Even then, there are certain deficits. What are the deficits in this module we talk about? We say like how the minorities, especially the Muslim communities, are underrepresented. Likewise, the women participation is increasing, but women lawmakers are not in accordance with their proportion in the population. You have hardly 10 to 12% women participation in the recent Lok Sabha. Earlier the situation was much worse. So this is one deficit. There is another problem about the participation and the representation, and that is about the many states having very less representation in the Rajya Sabha, which is supposed to be the Council of States. And even in the Lok Sabha also, we still follow the 1971 census as far as the allocation of the seats to the different states are concerned. So as a result, what is happening, that a member of parliament from Bihar in the Lok Sabha or a member of parliament in Uttar Pradesh would be forced to represent more and more, many more voters in comparison to a MP from, say, Kerala or a MP from Tamil Nadu, where the population has stagnated or population is going down. On the other hand, you know that Bihar, UP and all, the population is increasing much faster than the national average population growth rate. So this is also creating a problem. There is another problem about political representation, and that is about the number of the voters MP has to represent. If you compare, say, Great Britain, the member of the parliament in Great Britain, and say a member of parliament in the House of Commons would be representing, say, 2 lakh people, but in India a member of parliament in the Lok Sabha would be representing something like 10 lakh people. So there is this kind of problem which is coming up in today's India, which needs to be solved. Then in this module we also discuss another very important factor, and that is that do we have a two-track democracy in India, that the people are being asked to vote, and after they have voted they are asked to forget about the policy making. So this is another problem, that do the electoral participation, do the political participation, people participating in the meeting, in the political meeting, participating in the political debate, going through the party manifesto, or connecting to the politicians, does it really have a major impact on the policy making? Has it really impacted on the addressing the substantive issues? And then this module also raises this question, that do the substantive issues come up during the election times? So it's fine that the states have come up. In this module we talk about the rise of the states, how the states are becoming more and more important, how the local issues are becoming more and more important during the election time. All these things are welcome. The participation, increasing participation of the rural area, the women, minorities, tribals, the so-called lower caste, this is all welcome. But to what extent it is impacting on the policy making? That is something, a very crucial question, which we take in this module. In this module, we are going to discuss the changing nature of political participation and representation through voting in India. We would also try to understand the rise in the number and presence of regional political parties through changing nature of political participation and representation. When we look at how the politics in India had changed both at the national and state level, we see that a lot of changes have taken place, especially during the last decade or so. It may be difficult to trace all the changes, but the most important change that has taken place is that state politics has acquired a very important place in the politics of India. The emergence of state as the principal arena of political contestation is linked to the beginning of the post-Congress polity. In the first 2 decades, Congress used to win both national and state elections with a very huge margin. 1970s and 1980s saw a difference between national and state level politics. This was the second electoral system where national politics was the principal arena that overshadowed state politics. It was only in 1990s that the elections to the assemblies attained autonomy and also the ability to shape the outcome of the national elections. With sizable electoral support, the regional parties have not only managed to win elections and form state government, but they have also influenced the national parties. This has led to a greater level of recognition of the state as the primary unit of analysis and further to emergence the state politics as an autonomous discipline whose study is now being considered essential for understanding of Indian politics. Single party ruled almost every state for many years. Over the period, we have seen that there has been a rise of the regional parties and fall of national parties, and as a result, we see the coalition government coming up at the center, also at the state level. So the rise of regional parties has influenced not only the state parties but also the national politics. This has been very clear, and this has been noted by authors like Minor Wiener, Iqbal Narayan earlier period, and even now Atul Kohli has come out saying that India constituted a laboratory for comparative political analysis. We have many other writings also which have talked about the state's importance and why the state should be taken as a unit of analysis. We can refer to many authors, Mitra and Sain, Palshikar, K.C. Suri, Yadav and Palshikar, Varshney, Jeffrey Kanchan Chandra, Subrata Mitra, Stosh Varshney, Nirja Gopal Jayal, Rob Jenkins. They all have worked on the state politics, in which they present critical preliminary frame for interstate comparative analysis by presenting the critical issues for inquiry in the form of what they call the 10th thesis. 10th thesis on the state politics in India. Fifth thesis is quite important for us, and which says higher and more intense political participation at the state level has widened the base of democracy and sustained its legitimacy without enriching the quality of democracy outcome. This thesis relates to the degree, intensity, and the quality of political participation at the state level. The emergence of the state as the principal locus of political choice has meant that the electoral participation at the state level is higher than the national level. Political participation, as we know, is an essential part of the democratic process. Political participation derives from the freedom to speak out, assemble and associate, the ability to take part in the conduct of the public affairs, and the opportunity to register as a candidate, to campaign, to be elected, to hold office at all levels of government. A very important aspect of participation in electoral processes involves voting. Voter turnout is one of the best indicators of people's participation in the electoral process, but participation implies much more than the act of voting. Over the years, the participation has gone up both in terms of electoral turnout and in election-related political activity. The level of participation varies from state to state. On the whole, smaller states seem to have higher participation. States like Gujarat, Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh, and also larger states like Bihar and UP record lower level of participation in election and election-related activity. To start with, turnout is one of the best indicators of electoral participation in the electoral process. Let us see what changes have taken place as far as the electoral participation of different states are concerned. Participation in terms of electoral turnout. The Lok Sabha elections held during the 2 decades have witnessed nearly 60% turnout, and the only exception was the 1991 Lok Sabha elections when the turnout dropped to 55. But in the last elections, like if you refer to 2004, 2009, 2014, the electoral turnout has been more than 60%. The state-wise turnout in 2009 Lok Sabha election was not very different from the previous elections. States with the history of higher turnout witnessed higher turnout. The ones with lower turnout registered a lower turnout. So the trend has been precisely very steady, and those states like Punjab, they have always have had a bigger turnout than the national average. So this has been a trend, and if you see the assembly turnout also, the trend has been the same, that some states have had a higher turnout, other states have had a lower turnout. As far as the turnout among the voters of the different economic class is concerned, we find that turnout among the lower classes have been higher, and turnout among the middle and upper classes have been marginally lower than the national average. Classes participation. The lower class turnout has been higher in Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Tamil Nadu and West Bengal. So you have many states where the lower class turnout has been higher than the upper class voters. Now if we consider the voter pattern across the social communities, we find that the Dalits have voted more than average, and in comparison to other communities, non-Dalit communities, Dalits vote turnout has been much higher. And even here you can see the state-wise differences. Most of the states have witnessed higher turnout among the Dalit voters, and you can refer to Bihar, Assam, Delhi, Karnataka, Maharashtra. But these states, the turnout among the Muslims also has remained more or less same to the national average. Among the locality also one can see that there has been a much higher turnout in the rural segment in comparison to urban constituencies. So rural constituencies have much electoral participation in comparison to the rural constituencies. Turnout among the youth, if we consider the young voters are quite, their turnout has been lower than the national turnout. So it's not that the youth, and this is very important point because India is largely young, 65% of Indians are below the age of 35. But if you see the election survey data, it is there that the youth voting percentage is lower than the voting percentage of the other age group. As far as the turnout among the women is concerned, the women play a dual role in politics. They play the role as a voter and also political representative. We have in the assured representation of the women in the Panchayati Raj institutions, and where there you find that the states which are weaker states, the those the states like Uttar Pradesh, there the percentage of the women turnout has been much lower than other states. The states like West Bengal, which has the highest turnout among the women across all the states of India. This is like CSDS data which tells us. We see the political participation beyond voting and turnout. Political participation in a narrow sense, not only in terms of the participation in the political meeting or being participation in the elections, but it also means the participating in the rallies, meetings, campaigning, aware about. It's another aspect that the regional political parties, their numbers have increased. They are playing much more important role, and one of the reasons why they are playing such much an important role, because the national parties have declined. Just take the vote share of the Congress, it has declined sharply during the last few elections from 39.5% in the 1989, they went down to 28% in 2009. In 2014, they have further gone down, still lesser percentage of the voting in their favor. In fact, when we talk about the political representation in India, representation not only means the ensuring the individual participation, but these representatives can act as on behalf of the constituent who elected them. There is a need for giving adequate representation to the marginalized sections like women, and because women are not getting reservation benefits, so as such women are underrepresented. The same is true for the Muslims. They are underrepresented in terms of, if you consider the proportion to the population and the percentage of the Muslim lawmakers in the lawmaking bodies. We consider the caste also. Caste has played very important role, and in a way the voting has helped the lower caste to mark their presence also and to become strengthened. As far as the Muslims are concerned, the Muslims voting percentage of the Muslim MPs decreased in spite of the electoral victory of the Congress. So on an average, if we see the presence of the Muslims in the Lok Sabha, it has been quite, like in the 2014 just state, like there were 35 Muslim MP. In 1980 there were 49 MPs. So maximum has been 49 in 1980, and right now we know that in the 16th Lok Sabha in 2009 30. So we can see that in 2014 it is still lower than that. So the Muslims are thoroughly underrepresented in the Lok Sabha. Women are again another category which has remained underrepresented along with the Muslims. So on an average, as Nirja Jayal argues, that in the overall Lok Sabha, you can see that the women constituted not more than 6% of the total seats, 6 to 8%. No, maximum it has been more than around 10%, whereas the Muslims presence has been around 6% in the Lok Sabha. Let us conclude this module. In this module, we saw that how the voter turnout has increased over the period, how the voter turnout, which was in its 40s and 50s, now it has gone to the 60% or something. And then the participation is increasing with every election. As we go lower down the order, the participation increases. In this module, we also discussed about the voter turnout of the women, youth, minorities, and we also saw that how the representation has taken place in India, the different categories, are they being represented or not. So this is very important, that in this module we understood that how electoral democracy is becoming synonymous to India's democracy. Electoral politics has become most important factor in determining the course of politics in India. But unfortunately, though in a procedural sense, in terms of participation, contestation and representation, democracy is becoming a better democracy. But when it comes to having its impact on the policy making, over the substantive issues, the participation has not really caused much difference. You know, the increased level of electoral participation has not led to eradication of poverty. It has not really made the poor people who come in such a large number to vote, their concerns are not really being addressed. The kind of economy, as Deepak Nayyar has argued, that there is a kind of dissonance between the political democracy and the market economy, in the sense that the political democracy in India is becoming more and more inclusive. See the kind of a participation. More and more people are participating, not only in electoral terms but in political terms also. The new social movements are there, NGOs are there, and the party movement, party-led protest and all those things. People participation is increasing. Youth is also coming in a big way, though still, as we saw in the module, that the youth participation is still less. It can be better. The women participation is increasing. The minorities are also coming in large number. But unfortunately, what is happening is that despite the increased level of participation, the kind of market economy we are developing, that is by nature exclusionary. So these people who are coming in large number, we talked about the poor people, uneducated people, the so-called socially marginal groups, they do not really have the capacity or capital to be adjusted to in the existing market economy. So Deepak Nayyar has pointed out in one of his articles that there is a kind of dissonance, there is a kind of disconnect between the politics and the economy as they are taking shape in India. Then we can also refer another factor, that why can't we have a kind of a more electoral reforms and better kind of representation, so that the regional, inter-regional sense of neglect, or we can have an inter-regional parity. Every state can have a better kind of representation in the national, in the federal lawmaking body. And also, like, why can't we reduce the role of the money and the muscles and all, and can make our electoral system much more fairer, and we can give a kind of opportunity structure to all segments of the people, so that they can participate in a much more effective manner.